Good afternoon. I'm pleased to welcome you. It's okay. Hi. Okay. Good afternoon. I'm pleased to welcome you to a conversation that is a part of our visual arts curation by Tukral and Tagra titled Multiplay. The exhibition being showcased at the old GMC building as well as in locations across Panjim has works that blur the conventional boundaries of the artist and audience and encourage audience participation. We're very pleased to have with us on the panel Tukral and Tagra, a collaborative artist duo comprising Jitin Tukral and Sumir Tagra, who explore multidisciplinary media, including game design, installation, painting, sculpture, and film. We are also happy to have Ala Yunus and Sarnath Banerjee on the panel with us today. Ala Yunus uses her research led practice to seek instances where historical and political events collapse into personal ones. Her works examine issues of modern day and what informs visual and popular culture through a multiplicity of voices. She adapts the language of architectural model making to study the early studio stagecraft and the interplay of nations, but also brings publishing efforts under the same lens of investigation. Sarnath Banerjee is an Indian graphic novelist, artist, filmmaker, and co founder of the comics publishing house Phantom Gar. He teaches visual narrative at the University der Kunst Berlin. He was been sorry. He has been commissioned by the London Olympics to do a series of billboards across London titled The Gallery of Losers and has showed his work in national and international biennales. The conversation will be moderated by Srinivas Aditya Mopi Devi, an independent writer and curator based in New Delhi. He is currently principal investigator at the interdisciplinary lab Pollinator.io and a visiting faculty of visual arts at Ashoka University. Enjoy the conversation. Over to you, Srinivas.
Good afternoon. Um, since this is more of a cozy setting, I was worried it was going to be a big auditorium. Uh, I want to kind of have it as a more open-ended conversation of what is the relationship between public play and art. To kind of thinking about, because the public role of art is something that I've been thinking about as a curator, because as artists, curators, that's pretty much our everyday kind of thing. What our imagination is, whether it would actually speak to the public. And it's very heartwarming that this morning that whole thing has been very actively, moving without any kind of, additional kind of uh, anecdotes or things like that that you had to push. There is a kind of an intuitive kind of interactivity that is in place, and which is, I know, is at the heart of the multiplay, that you create systems that activate in the conversation with the public. So one of the first questions, because we all three of you or all four of you, being one duo, come from very different trajectories of practice, but also have alignments that are kind of speak to each other. It could be nice to start talking about what, according to you, is the public role of art. Yeah.
Thank you, Srinivas. I think for thinking about these subject matters, I mean, what is the reason of why are we getting up in the morning and doing this kind of an exhibition or trying to do an exhibition in terms of building up a festival which is allowing people to come for a particular time of the year and a week and then get here at 10 a.m. to understand what to see. I think we all are looking for some kind of a reason, purpose. I think that's where it begins, that some people who have a reasoning to put things together, they align and then kind of try to manifest an idea. But also, like, thinking about what public and what arts does is it's also learning, sharing together. That I will actually learn standing with the volunteers how people are actually getting reading. Are they reading the text? Are they reading? What are they doing? I think it's to do with learning, probably.
Thank you very much for having me here, for including my work, and for allowing me also to see how the public interact with not just my project, but also these other projects. I found it fascinating when we've worked together before, so you've explained this idea of how you turn your projects into interactive pieces that basically allows visitors to sit longer with a piece of work that is stemming from, most of the time, political commentary and your analysis of social issues, or calling for people to engage with these in a much more accessible way, which I found fascinating and could quickly grasp what you're trying to do in Multiplay. So congratulations on that. And at the same time, I think it was a challenge because when artists produce projects, they are producing them because there's something inside them that is pushing them to make a piece of work, or whether in whichever form or format. And then to imagine that this piece is to also be shared and reproduced, or kind of is bringing people inside it and giving them a chance to either activate it or remake it, becomes like a question to why would people care, or why would people want to be in this particular project. And so it was not an easy, just, quickly, let's do this. And then the more complicated the instructions probably becomes like the more distancing of audience it might be. So I want to say that the public is, at the end of the day, is a very big word, and it doesn't really reflect how much we interact with people, because as much as we open the format and let people engage, there's still also we are engaging with people who are willing to engage, right? So they come to us because the possibility or this promise that they are willing to engage with, which I also find interesting, that people also give you this space, so extended space, which I also feel that's a platform or a political gesture also on the side of people, that they are also not deciding that that they want to engage with something else, for instance, on these days. So yeah, if we enter all these elements inside what we are looking at or engaging with, there is so much, in fact, to be appreciative of. And my project about playgrounds is basically, if we go to the next, maybe kind of explains this situation where I was trained as an architect, and I was thinking that while I was studying architecture, that I was, of course, to learn more, we had to consult magazines, and architecture magazines would feature only the most perfect or like the most successful projects, and many of the magazines that many projects were featured that had won prizes. And I was always impressed by the prizes given to projects that worked with their environment or had allowed people to activate the piece of architecture. And mostly they looked like projects that worked with the environment, but also included children playing somewhere in them. So I was thinking that maybe the next slide. That idea of a playground is a good place for meeting and for trying to play in multiple ways, and built this small model from play furniture, but also play landscape that was designed by Isamu Niguchi, the Japanese US artist. In fact, because he has not built such playgrounds or built it in particular locations, that I wanted, in fact, to claim the relationship of modern playgrounds into the areas where I also come from. And we are giving the audience a chance to build their own playgrounds based on this is just a demonstration, but they can also build the model they want. And all these walls are going to be filled with models of visitors who are also sitting with other visitors sometimes that they don't know around the table to think together for 1 hour using this very nice clay material that you've curated, which does not stain fingers, but also is air dry, so like soon dries to become a small sculpture that is also light and very easily portable. So yeah, in this case, I mean, understanding what's the role of art, I don't think it's a role as much. I mean, in my view, I think each one of us is just doing what they feel they need to be working on, and then it's an expanded space of interaction and conversation that the audience allows for this to have a role somehow, if you want to call it that way.
Thank you. Actually, that's really true because public role of art is also putting a kind of an a priori understanding of what the art should be and what art should do. But it's also a question of, we keep talking about it in Delhi 15 years ago. The publicness of art is something that was actively discussed, and some way very subconsciously that even conversation of what is the publicness of it, art is kind of lost in the extravagant, manifestation of the institution of art itself. And it kind of worries us because we also want time to reflect, critique, and also reconfigure our methods and possibilities. And departing from there, we have Sarnath, who I have had the fortune of having multiple conversations in many contexts in the past 8 to 10 years. As somebody who writes, who draws, who tells stories through the form of graphic novel, does exhibitions, navigates through very different forms of readership and conversation, and also does performances as well. I want you to, because that is a very different possibility of readership and conversation, and from that, if you can depart.
Why I do what I do, right, as in like the publicness of what I work on. Yeah, so I a lot of it what Sumir said is to learn. When you deeply look at a theme or a subject, the theme kind of it's a deep look into something, and a deep sort of meditation into something, and uncanny things happen when you actually engage with something. And art for me is an engagement. It's in this world where everything seems to be sort of either easily accessible or very optimized to our needs and things like that. It is one slow space. It's like slow dating, in a sense that, it has its pitfalls and it has its rejections, and you get rejected face to face or over an email or one telephone conversation. You don't get like this sort of, large scale rejection that sometimes what I was fancy talking about all this in Goa. Yeah, so enchantment, and to kind of to stay in a state of enchantment, to self enchant yourself, and also get the whole hujum, the whole group of people to kind of to get enchanted with you, and also sort of so. Yeah, so comics for me has always been a way to enter different worlds, and a way to kind of this sort of deep look and deep hearing, and also like your sort of a group of people sitting together and doing something, the communal feeling that I'm not going to talk about community building, because now in Germany going to a birthday party is also a community building exercise. So, but yeah, there is that sort of yeah, I can't think right now. I can't think of anything clever to say, but over the
I have a prompt, but we'll come back.
yeah.
Chain tweets.
Oh yeah. So I was hoping to talk about it tomorrow, but so for example, Chainpreet is a deep engagement with. I've noticed in the last few years, my women friends have been like the most damaged with all the kind of current political situations that are going around in the world, essentially with Palestine, for example, and they seem to be like self-harming themselves to the point that some of them are losing their sanity, sleep. Friends, lots of lost friends. Now we are like walking around this sort of cemetery of like lost friends, and somehow kind of pulling out and in is kind of very hard. I found among my male friends, on the other hand, seemingly you can kind of hop in from one big event to another big event with relatively it's easier to kind of disengage with something and move on to something that there was for a limited period I was interested in something, and then now like and this is kind of damaging, and women are dying because of that. I mean, either they're dying physically or there's something inside them is sort of dislodging and falling apart. Chenpreet is one of those people who, and being intelligent, she also, like Schopenhauer said, that intelligence is like an enemy because it helps you to kind of justify blind will. So if you tell her that why do you kind of come to your sofa, Chenpreet comes home after a day's work, goes to the sofa, opens her reels, and then time just flies. She gets into a wormhole, and oh, my work is also here. How professional. So and she kind of slips into the sort of this time zone, and she comes out in this sort of state of extreme malaise. So like full malaise, and it's like she calls it like my own private Malaysia, like my own private Idaho. And she, so the show is all about like some of her kind of, what was the word, not Nafrat is your word, but no, neither that. The general sort of I forgot, there were 4 different keywords that she sort of feels will come back to me, and she sort of slips into this sort of state of absolute misery while she's watching these reels, and time just sort of, and when she comes out of it she feels even more miserable. And that's when TNT told me that it could be nice to kind of create the character around the wrestler Pogat, and because I was looking for my Chenpreet, because Chenpreet for me has been a culmination of many women I've once upon a time knew intimately, biblically, whatever. So so basically the posters are all about from these from spineless boyfriends to annoying NRIs, huh? Macchiato is the NRI kind of the memory culture NRIs, to the uncle, the great kingdom of uncles who sort of who are absolute asshole to anyone below them, complete ass lickers to anyone above them, and suspicious of anyone around them. So I guess we'll talk a lot more about that. I want to finish it right now, but questions, answer. Yeah.
So I want to just go back to the exhibition slide, the plan, just right here. So as someone who works with exhibitions day in and day out, exhibition itself is a system where ideas become public, and it has this, at the end of the day there are many other formats, I agree, but it has this really open, volatile, contested space that it can actually create lots of conversations and even conflicts possible in some cases. So while that's why I brought this particular the trail of going through the multiplay. So for the audience to know how the multiplay began and took its trail, it will be good to have a like a little bit of a journey through how you went about it.
Yeah, I think for both of us, Multiplay was a very obvious reach out as a sense of answer of this question that will you curate a project in old GMC building? It's a very interesting thing. There is a sense of history to it. People I met in 2022, that 2 people I met randomly, they said I was born in this room, I'm standing here. So it was very interesting for us to kind of look into that, how a childhood memory, child has grown, and now after 22 whatever years, the person is standing there, and we are actually looking into somebody's work, which is kind of like activating that kind of memory box for him. For both of us, I think playing together is it's like making a work every day, and we've been doing it over 2 decades. That he will actually come with an idea, and then I'll be mostly in a bad mood. So, and I will receive the idea and kind of like churn on it and kind of like supply back, like my return of volleys later, and his will be very fast. And then so we will basically constantly talk about these little ideas which we see as some kind of a form, and eventually we'll keep tossing, and then immediately if the idea has any gravity, it'll settle down. So that's how we make paintings, or we kind of like work on the sculptures. And somebody who does something and I do something else. So the multiplay for us was that there is this word which we actually got really addicted to called attention cartography. Like also looking after the Instagram, we actually wanted to make an exhibition which has 0 phones. However, we have QR codes for kind of like people to view it later, that not everybody can hold a newspaper. So we had to introduce different modalities of kind of scanning through the camera. But the exhibition is no tech. There is 0 tech. Literally, there's just one film or a sound, but it's not really like hi-fi like on the first floor. And
This was more from our earlier body of works which we had done in Baudelaire Art Museum. So where people come and participate, called Games People Play. So which has 9 different games and projects people were coming and participating. So which we saw the amazing response, how people want to be engaged more than just look at the artwork and walk out. So not only one of the works, so we thought we want more projects wherever are gathering. Even we have a plan called Poems on Move, where people even walk out of the exhibition when they go to sit in a shuttle. Then they sit in a shuttle and there somebody's in the car is performing only for you. And we want one-to-one relationship with the poet and the audience. So that's also another project. So even so we use the word cartography. One exhibition we put up together. It was not we were part of the exhibition in Khoj, where you are involved when you enter the exhibition till you exit the exhibition. So that was our experience. So we thought like it makes more sense for us to make a multiplay and plan accordingly.
So just concluding to your thing, I think there are multiple entry points, and imagining a site as a gameplay, and then you are actually taking a top view of, like, when we are designing the exhibitions, we make a maquette. So now imagining yourself right in the middle of it. So I think it is to do with how people interact, how people track their flows, and like this is my exercise. Like when I'm actually about to sleep, I will actually go through the day's trajectory, what all I did, that I spent here and did that. So and all those things come together in some which way. So that's.
Thank you. Also, I love the drawing. So, Ala, I want to just reflect, because I knew about your practice. I didn't fully knew, but in the preparation for this panel, I was looking at it. And there is a constant intersection of archaeology, history, political conflicts, movements. But one thing that kind of was very curious for me, and it would be nice to know, is that how does all of this shrink into a form and come out into the public, and what is this miniaturizing, for a lack of a better word, kind of, especially of whether it is army of people, as we saw in that work you showed in Istanbul, I think over a decade ago, or the current one, that, what is this? Because when I saw it, I remembered this work that Walid showed in his retrospective, where an exhibition shrinks. And of course, it's a fictional exhibition that he's talking about. I was kind of very curious about why, whether it's the conflict that makes you think that shrinkage is necessary. We want to know.
So I was trained as an architect, and so during studies we have to make plans, and we have to make them look beautiful and and the more creative we are in rendering our drawings and figuring out how we make produce these 3D impressions of of the designs we're producing, the more we could possibly impress the jury, or the people who are gonna mark our tests or our assignments. And of course, within all of that, and it wasn't yet the time of computers. I mean, AutoCAD and all of this came at. It was in the second half of my education. So when I was first trained, was trained how to make models by hand. And so there's always this fascination, like that I found not just in myself, but also people who were helping me. Like, I don't know, make the furniture that we're gonna put inside the model, all of that. How people were willing to play with the model idea. And then it's always very, very difficult to, yes, it is very political, and there's always like these like stories that just open endlessly, endless, like, chains of other stories and people's lives that just go inside any project. But at the same time, the idea of what they translate into is a most difficult idea. It's the most difficult moment, because do you make a model, or do you make a painting, or do you make a interactive piece? Or that's very difficult to decide. So I'm always late sending curators these informations. And it comes together really in the moment of the exhibition. So just like I always also travel carrying a lot of stuff with me, and then they come together at this moment of installation when I'm just there and see with my body and myself how I'm testing the elements that came out throughout the research, including these little examples of things that I produced to test or impossibility to show. But when you mentioned Walid Rad, it's a good example, because I was after I finished studying architecture, I did not work in architecture. I worked in as designer for a little while, as children books, not publisher, but bookstore. I had a bookstore. I worked in many things before deciding to just stay in the arts. And I was a painter, like, the segue from making architecture to becoming an artist, thinking I should paint. But I felt that there was like limitation to the painting as a medium, and people like Walid Rad didn't paint. And I was like self-studying a lot of examples, such as like the work of Walid Rad and Mona Hatoum, many other artists. But what was fascinating is basically how it's legit, like it was very legitimate to just use the narrative inside the work, and to make the narrative build a project, and so becomes, my walls become my stories, things like that. And once I could see this realization, the model in itself became a different realm, or a different meaning, because it's not a piece of architecture anymore. It's just it's a way to turn these stories into some sort of a form, mostly 3D form, but sometimes I have renders of architecture, so they are not really real 3D objects. And political is always there, and as someone who comes from the Middle East, it's continuous, like, engagement with the politics every day, and to understand that this is also part of history that is embedded within our bodies, DNA, or whatever you want to call it. So anything that I produce or read or look at, it cannot be separated from the political. Even if I'm saying hello to someone, or someone saying hello back to me, or something. So it's a disease, but at the same time, it has been also feeding, and maybe it has found art as an outlet to put I don't know, all these like electric stuff that are fighting inside each other into some sort of a form that is thankfully also has resonated with other people, and kind of allowed for more interaction to take place, even when, I mean, the energy of interacting my art arrives to me even when I'm not standing in front of it. So it has kind of helped me personally.
Thank you. Sarnath, I know you don't want to speak too much today because you're also jet lagged, but one thing that always fascinated me about your work is storytelling, that you don't really know when, if Sarnath talking to you, or he's actually started already telling stories. And in a lot of our conversations, we have actually spoken about fiction as a way of telling the truth, that because the way of directly telling the truth is not accessible, and that's one of your like main strong forms. But at the same time, I want to ask a very different question. Like, since we have worked like 8-9 years ago, the world has changed, and you also, the for example, the landscape of Berlin has changed even like since like 4-5 years ago. So what happens to storytelling in a time like that, where you really don't know what story should I tell, how I should tell, whether I should tell or not, and I would like to.
That's a very nice question, and especially after Allah had just spoken about how she creates a framework of objects, designs, and places, which kind of either creates hauntings or an idea of a story that is like barely being told, but you know that something has happened here, and some kind of a spectrality of the designs without actually ever needing to kind of call out politics, politics which is like dhar dhar on your face kind of a thing, which is a lot of practices also, like also in social media. You know that somebody takes up a political issue and then kind of reinstates it in different ways, and therefore like also have a popular group of followers who would like sort of very clearly get that politics, which is why it gets back to the uh, role of art, and also like the word multiplay, the playing, the ludophilic approach towards politics, which is in Bangladesh, for example, strangely enough, a lot of literature, politics is always in a surreal kind of a level. There's one book called Chilekotar, I forgot the second one. It's basically Akhtarul Zaman alias Chilekotar Shepai, the Attic soldier, who basically looks at the whole 1950s post-independence riot through a ghost which appears in the sort of attic room, and has this sort of demented conversation with this guy who is part of the politics but also not part of the politics. Sort of he kind of imagines. There are famously scenes of like ghosts appearing, and ghosts have always had a great relevance in political discourse. Whenever you silence something, it kind of reappears like as a ghost. It's like a body odor kind of a thing beneath expensive French perfume kind of a thing. So
But also your character Karwa Denge is that is
yeah, there are characters,
action oriented.
absolutely. So this political, being sort of, so that's the role of artists. Your first question kind of is very nicely sort of answered by Allah, which is that Walid writes children's stories for adults. He is sits in his little Cooper Union office and puts up stories about 4 historians who go to the race course and put money on race courses. These historians don't exist. There's absolutely. So my ex-wife Bani Abidi did a film about whole Karachi waiting for a VIP to appear, and the VIP never appears, and the whole city is like activated because really funny stories about a man in an oversized suit waiting and kind of making mulazim character, somebody who always follows order, a generation of clerks who can only sort of follow orders. And these are amazing things that artists can do, which because of imagination. And I have found that in universities, especially in Germany, for example, you're talking about, there's no lack of critical theory. You wash your mouth with vodka and critical theory every morning. That's so critical theory is kind of cheap because all MA students, everybody talks like MA students. But the problem is critical imagination. Now, if you've learned all your Hockheimers and Frankfurt School, and then you have a Habermas who says things like, some people have all rights to defend themselves, while other people are not people, fundamentally. But how to kind of tell people that children are children. When my child having a stomach problem is equal to another person's child also having stomach problem. But that imagination of the other, and they use words like empathy and all that kind of new agey words. It's not about empathy. It's like lack of imagination. Just because the person has been othered, it's not my problem. We Indians do it also. Indians are politically very what to say, like the mob politics, Indian political, I'm not talking about local politics or what the Trinamool cadre is beating up the CPIM cadre and that kind of politics I'm not talking about, but the political being, I think we've so optimized to win that that is kind of so when we see the works of our neighbors, and which are like, when you said that you're a political being, when you talk, it comes out. That's been lucky. And storytelling, I feel, can kind of bring that back. It's not like just sort of, protest and like posters and this, that. It's something more to create the political game. And I feel stories are one way of doing it.
And also fiction, since we spoke about Valid, I remember in every lecture, because he says that he's actually telling fiction in the very, very subtle, there'll be like one word inserted somewhere, but nobody pays attention. And everybody thinks that he's actually giving historical facts, but they're all only constructed
We
fiction.
have someone like Walid Rath in India. That is Govinda, the filmmaker. He also made the biggest. This is an Indian actor who became very famous for a song that he sang, which was like, "I was walking on the street eating bhelpuri and minding my business, and then suddenly, like a couple of months back, he shot himself in the foot." And German politics is a bit like that. They're doing fine for 15 years, created a diverse society and stuff like that. And now they've shot themselves in the foot. And it's a bit. So we have our Walid Rath in Govinda. So don't undermine our cultural base.
Go on. You say.
No, I was just thinking about the kind of interconnections, like, your subject matter in the, while we were actually planning the subject matter, we knew that this kind of a ranting or of building up this kind of a discourse will develop, and that's why the empty room and the empty chairs are. Those chairs are characters. One of the chairs, which we actually found from a local store, has two extensions, so the chair is not sitting like this but sitting like this, so there's somebody like so I was like, "Is something wrong with this chair?" He was like, "Yeah, they just added on two little things so that somebody had a back problem." And that back problem insertion is taken care in the book Massage, so if one wants to do
It's the order of things you
yeah, order of things. Yeah, I mean, yeah, that's what I would do.
From storytelling, you also curate. You're also artists and curators. And I know, and Sumer and I have a joke about it, what is artistic behavior and curatorial behavior. Like very different kind of processing of thinking through. Both in terms of materiality, but sometimes there are many overlaps also. And I want you to maybe talk a little bit about what kind of topics, imaginations that come to you when you actually set out to curate, thinking with other practices, not just about within your own process that you already embodied. Like you have to take a little bit of a detour, think from other people's perspective, and see at the same time that it aligns with the larger vision that you have as a creative practitioner. Both of you, anyone who wants to.
First of all, I'm lucky to work with artists who are curating, because I think it's a blessing, because it just makes an artwork grows in an interesting way. So I was lucky that we are working on this, and there's another project that's also working with an artist with a curator who's an artist, and I find it different from curators who are interfering in an artist's work, trying to push for something. So there's something about feeling the art, from the point of, if I would make it, how would I make it? Which I also appreciate the advice. It's very, very interesting, the question about where do we start when we want to curate, because you can start from anywhere technically. It's just the world is huge, and any topic has many elements or ways to enter to it. I was looking at this drawing that you had, thinking about how you close some doors, open some doors, and I was thinking, if I'm curating, maybe I will open all the windows and test the architecture. What was it trying to do with all these windows? So, but then it's not like that. Of course, when you want to make the thing, you are listening to some sort of a gut feeling that something is not something is missing or not sitting in its place in a proper way, not proper, like in a settled way, and you ask, why is it hinging, why there's this thing that seems to be either ignored or seems to be either annoying or seems to be staying with you somehow, and I start looking for what is this what is this feeling So, for instance, I just give an example. I mean, we collaborated on some of the projects that I co-curated with my friend Maha Ma'moon, who together we publish in a series called Kaifata that we both co-founded. And it's Kaifata means how to. So basically, we were walking. We had this feeling that after Arab Spring, like after 2011, that everybody has been doing revolutionary things. We should do something too. But at the same time, we noticed that first of all there are now it's more than obvious than before that some people have political views that are different than yours, and sometimes fundamentally different. And it's only that such moments that make us understand that we have different views, because overall before that it was all courteous. Hi, I like your writing, I like your art, things like that. Now, no, I don't like what you said in this particular piece. So we thought, well, we want to publish something, and then we were in a bookstore in Berlin, ProQM, and it has lots of books, and all related to art. And to think of where we're coming from, the Arab world, I don't know, in India, there's not enough like books on art from this diversity, also from this contemporaneity, like things that about the moment. And on top of everything, these books were super expensive. So if you want to buy 4 books, bring them down back to your home, where let's say the Egyptian pound devalued in that year, then you're really paying a lot of money for just 4 pieces of text that maybe half of the people are not going to know how to read it because you need to translate it. So anyways, we decided on that day to make nice books that are nice from inside outside, so they look nice as much as they read nicely, and secondly that they are cheap and in Arabic. So that's how like an idea came out. It's just from feeling that there was a need for something. But then these books, because of these qualities, they were not carried by distributors, because they're not going to make so much money on a small book. And we were always our series was always referred to by our funders or institutional partners. So they will always say, oh, this is a serendipity book. They wouldn't say it's Tukral and Tagra's book, because the idea of 2 artist publishers didn't also manifest in people's imagination. So we thought, why don't we use exhibition invitation that we got to curate an exhibition about publishers, independent publishers, artists who publish or engage with the format of publishing. And so again, it's a response to a need. But then what is a show about publishing anyways? It's not only books. It's about the effort of publishing. So you show histories, and that's when we started looking into what we were reading when we were young, or what we are aspiring to find, or what we have lost in our scene, or people who we look up to, but also artists who are using the medium to make it a more fascinating space to interact with the audience as well. So, and that's how we, for instance, met, by means of finding how do we speak to the public in the format of publishing, and then afterwards we find other ways to collaborate. So it starts always from either a need or a hunch, and it always allows you to just unpack a much larger domain and terrain. As much as you want to put effort into that, you manage.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think there are many ways how we actually started working. Number one was this practices which are holding themselves really strongly, so then only they can open up further. Like there is a sort of a sense of evolved vocabulary, such as Ala's. And then also the second benefit was about it can be seen as an architecture which holds people, and then allows it to kind of like open up windows and then doors, and then people can actually activate things. So we have 5 or maybe 6 architects in our core team, core artist list. That's something to begin with. And also, and if an architecture can do the same thing, such as a comic or illustration can do the same thing, you're actually writing something which will be then read by somebody in some other time of life. So you're actually, like what Dayanita's conversation is about, she's making a book for a future reader. So there is a sort of a sense of anticipation of the final outcome of the person who will be actually engaging with the work which is done at some other timeline. and you kind of like bring those things together. So like if we're actually giving a book massage, we don't know the text. I mean, since it is a new project, this is only like few hours in the making of the project, and we already are like overbooked with people who want to get a massage and also try to read a text. So it's just an experiment. But also, where are these awkward or maybe like typical peculiar situations to kind of to create these settings where people can actually come and bring an object of hate and get a haircut, like so but also there are different ways how we actually went on to selecting artistic practice, uh, also different ways to how a writer is responding to the static curatorial text. So there is a new device which we have actually built is liquid text. It's also like the flow of people and the text is liquid. So thinking through these terminologies and the verbs of flow and kind of like spreading around and uncontrollable, you're actually prompting text which is also evolving as the subject matter goes alive.
You will notice every room in Multiplay outside the frame, which is slidable. So the creator writer will come in, Ranjan, who will come and participate every day. On every day, he writes new text.
Yeah, and it also annotates on a daily basis, right? You walk through, and especially with corridors like this, every time you see things in different order, you don't.
Something came in my mind. We were just talking, and suddenly somebody said that serendipity, walking serendipity, is like, where is serendipity team? Yeah, where is like a 3-dimensional Instagram. So you're like constantly moved around and kind of rolled around because there is a multi events happening at the same time.
We can open up questions, comments, thoughts. Anyone? No? Such calm audience. Huh? Huh? No questions or hesitant to ask questions.
Vidisha has questions.
I have a
Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
she has questions.
I have a question.
Thank you. Thanks for all the inputs. So we have talked a lot about art as a medium to engage, to create conversation, to interact, also to manifest idea. I'm curious to know how does that interaction or how the role of public art changes, if it's one-to-one or one to a group or one to many.
If comic is a public art, then how would you say?
That was a hard question, but a good question nonetheless. So your question, if I understood, is how does it differ whether it's one-to-one or whether it's one to many? Let's look at it from another point of view. When you are very involved in social media, for example, a lot of artists are currently highly involved in social media, or also like these days I've started reading my comics, meaning I mean they call it performance, but it's just basically theatrical reading of comics, which is and that's I have noticed that usually there's a gathering of people and I do it like a salon. You can drink whiskey or have a samovar of tea or whatever, and people sit around and I tell a ghost story or a story of a murder or a intrigue, or I try. It's not like intentionally I try to make it political, but I have become a little bit of a politics with a small p, which is what the kind of politics that I like, not politics grand P's, because that I find extremely boring mostly. So I've noticed that because of these performances, just recently I did something on the German letterbox, the Briefkasten, which is where a lot of German terror happens, because the letterbox, you don't open it because you don't know what is waiting for you inside. a tax receipt or a unpaid bill or a electricity bill for which you need to have crowdsourcing, or Jack the Ripper sitting inside, or Shining's Jack Nicholson sitting inside with an axe which is going to cut your hands off. This is how state level terrorism happened in Berlin. So you don't really, three unopened envelope can kind of make sure that you're a destitute by the end of it. Those are the only people send me. Nobody else. One occasional cousin might send, like, oh, Amazon. I actually like advertisements even. It's better than like having some of the mails from the authority. So I did this performance, and then it was very well received, and it was there was a lot of public adulation. And then I followed it with a story about another story, which a film called Arvind Desai Ka Ajib Dastan, which is about a man in South. It was written by. It was a film by Said Naqvi and Said Mirza. It's about a man who just drives around Bombay in his Fiat car. Nothing happens. The story is basically about a man steps out of his house and things happen to him. And at night he comes back to his parents' house and all the things that happens. And at the end of the film he dies by accidentally killing himself with his father's pistol, and the death is also very pointless, just like the whole film. But the pointlessness, it was like tightly written nothings, very well. That also went down well, but not as well as the first story, which was full of like punch and bizarreness and contemporariness. When I realized there's a danger of like, being a public performance, when you're starting slowly your mind and the ego starts like were doing things which people start liking. And imagine what happens when you are an Instagram friendly artist or a Facebook kind of thing. Then you start to produce work, and then, even if you're very strong character and you only do things for yourself, but that, how come I got only 75 likes when that nonsense that I did like got 300 likes? So slowly your brain also starts becoming a bit like a nonsense, and I think it has some effect when you do things for a large group of people. There's a danger in it. You get fan followers, you get people who kind of demand, and then you start demanding things, which is why rule number 1, get off social media.
Wow. I didn't see that coming.
If you want to get to any original thing or whatever little bit of, like people, like my mother says that, what do I do with my garbage? I make it into work. Whatever, it's still my garbage, right? So I feel like, we can keep our compost to ourselves. And I know I'm sounding very radical, but I am also on Instagram. And obviously we do it. But so take it with a pinch of salt. And I feel like, playing out to an audience for me is a bit dangerous. I still like to work for me and 4 of my other loser friends who constantly not like what I continue doing, and that's a usual thing that has worked for me.
Also, it's a matter of retention exercise today, literally. Art, I teach in a classroom of extremely distracted individuals, and art is and I literally have to shut the PowerPoints, the computers, and because of them I have to teach a technology and art course without a slide projection, because I worry that nothing is going to retain, and I somewhere bring art in that space where some form of retention, which is, I've realized, too much to ask for these days. But at the same time, beyond the pragmatics of it, what Sarnath said is that I think still, thankfully, it's the space where the reorientation of your vision from the attention economy can be brought back. Still people will sit, touch clay. Still people will sit, get a massage. Still people will sit, listen to a book. You're all completely capable of doing these things. It's just that somewhere somebody else has given you like a spin that you're endlessly like going in, and it's not nobody's fault. And I think thankfully we have situations like these where you are sometimes like led to a space, oh, I didn't actually realize that I could actually sit and look at a tree for 10 minutes. And I don't know how many of you looked at tree for 10 minutes straight the last time. And it's a kind of a classroom exercise that I do, and they come up to me and say, Professor, 10 minutes is too long. And that's the kind of the world that we're looking at. And that's why I think multiplay, that when it becomes, is to actually, it's a multi-sensorial to, I and my colleague were talking, when children play, all the senses are activated, right? And I don't know how many senses of us are activated when we are actually experiencing, and that way the multiplay can actually remind you that wait a minute, there are other senses that can actually also activate, that we should not let them lie dormant and leave in the even the horizon by themselves. Yeah.
I think you've answered both beautifully. I think, you've answered the questions, both of you. Yeah.
Any other questions?
I think it's also a question of self-emancipation, that, impact, question about impact and all this. They're not like questions that I think ideally we need to deal with. That how much our work is going to impact how many people, how many it's going to really have an effect, and whatever gets into like a movement. I mean, it's also a process of our own When I was in my 20s, I wanted to be a star. I wanted to be like my books to be read by everyone and whatever. You went to bookshops and you kind of said, oh, how come this book is not here? And then you're trying to sort of hide, like pretend that you're a reader, and you're horrified that Sarnath Banerjee's book is not there. And then you're like, kind of, how come have you not heard of this book? And then the guy comes and says that, Mr. Banerjee, your book is out of stock. but we're going to restock. Very highly embarrassing. So you do also ridiculous things to kind of and because of,
We checked today with the
yeah,
with the volunteers. It was like, so there were two people just walked into the room without even reading the text. I mean, which is fair, and he said, "What is yahan kya ho raha hai? Like, what is happening?" So I was like, "Sir, even I want to know what is happening." So so it is interesting to kind of like be like nobody, to kind of like go and check it out, and then fail.
Yeah, and the feeling is how you ginne ka tamiz, as we say it. Giro magar ginne ka tamiz rahe. Fall, but fall elegantly. So that's what like art definitely taught me. But one of the things, like, so you learn, it's a question of self-emancipation. So it's same editor, Ravi Singh. When I went like, hey Ravi, how come my books are out of stock? Because I get phone calls from everyone saying that I want to read your book, but I can't find that book in the bookshop. Ravi sat there and he said, do you want a cup of tea? I said, yeah, okay. And then he says that, then I told him again, how come my books are like out of stock? And he looked at me, he says, pets die. So I think pets die. So, what can we do? Nice note to end, no?
I think it's a good exhibition title.
Yeah,
Pets die.
Pets die.
yeah. So coming like similar to this is a generic question for all of you. Like being an artist, does it occur to you sometimes? Let's say, if when you were 20 and after a decade or something, do you still struggle to be relatable, or do you find that urge to be more likable towards people? And what if my art doesn't speak the way the same I was trying to portray? There is always a not competition, but you can say there is always a certain inner voice that an artist has. I'm making it from a place of heart. What if other people don't perceive it from the same level? So how do you deal with that, and has it evolved you as a person over the period of time, is what my question is.
I mean, you're always aging at every minute. As we are speaking, we are aging, we are evolving. We are also thinking about what I was actually doing 20 years back. Always. This is a self-check. It's more of what you need to do is just being honest about these things. That this is what I'm feeling about. And I think this answer or this kind of inquiry will be self-answered from that perspective. You're not here to please. I mean, at least when we are doing, we're not pleasing anybody. We are trying to make if we are making a painting, we both have to resolve ourselves. to a larger concept? Are we like, how much aligned are we towards that? And if you're making a project like a multiplay or curatorial sort of a premise, we are trying to see what is the essence of it. And it's not about pleasing somebody. We are interested in projects of care. We are interested in project sites which can create frameworks. And in that sense, this kind of exercise, I don't think so we could have done 15 years back. You know, I think so. It is your age will also guide you. So one doesn't really have to feel freaky about it. Oh, sorry, Siri is listening. So, but it's more of, I think, re-looking or looking inwards and then coming out with the ideas.
Product advertisements for the next 3 days.
There are many ways for a person to check in with reality. First of all, why you're checking in with reality? Because you feel left out, you feel you're trying hard and no one is listening, you feel that it's worth, but but what is people looking for? I mean, you ask yourself first, why do I care that people should care? And based on that, you also look for the answers. So I think if you ask many artists, if you ask them, like growing up, did you feel you're lonely or you're strange or you're awkward? They'll all answer yes. And not only artists, but it's, do you feel that you like things differently than others, or you do things in a different way than others? But that's okay, I think. The thing is that if it's standing in the way of your career and you're trying to make it somewhere, then maybe fake it till you make it. I don't know. I mean, you have to have some sort of if that's what you want. But if you're making the art you're making because you want to make it for yourself, then it doesn't matter really that people are picking it up or not, joining the conversation or not. And that's maybe another answer to the one-to-one or to one-to-many. Well, I feel that first and foremost, I'm producing for myself. So because you referenced this image about 10 soldiers, so there is like around 12,261 toy soldiers hand painted. So it took a lot of time, a lot of people, a lot of back hurt, and but also strategic thinking, all sorts of things. And then standing in front of the work, I felt that everybody should be impressed for a moment. And then when one person wasn't impressed, I asked why should I, like, it's not why should I expect that everybody should be impressed? At the end of the day, I produced this because I wanted to make it. I wanted to produce 1 to 200 of the real armies that are fighting in the Middle East, for instance. And once I saw it in front of me, okay, I'm finished. I get my point. And then other people get interested. Other people didn't get it, or didn't want to be interested. But that was a moment when I promised myself that I have to always remind myself that I'm producing for my own, because there's something that's coming from inside me that is pushing me. And good news, people are willing to engage with you even when you are also just doing the thing you want to do it. Because they kind of, it resonates at the end of the day. Surprisingly. But in a good way, yeah.
Actually, one of the artist mentors that I really admire keeps saying that art is actually something that you stumble upon, not really that you very directionally go ahead and produce, something that you stumble. So the idea of what I should be doing is not really the plan that you have made. And another thing that he said is that when you actually make something, when you're making something with a certain sense of generosity, even if it is just expressing your own, then there is a certain sense of a humanly interaction that's like very easily possible, that I should not do this thereby that something else is happen. I want to keep my mind open and create a certain sense of openness. And it looks like sometimes even simple embodiment thinking like that also is very different. I know it's easy to say, but there are people who have actually practiced this, where who haven't shown, artists who have not been shown for 70, 80 years, who are just continuing to make art every day, only and hardly their 3 friends or 4 friends might have seen
Yeah.
all their life in so many examples in the world, but that didn't stop them from making art. So I think that's a great
And
example.
curators are on the hunt these days to look for artists who didn't show before or has worked so long, yeah, working on their own in small groups or doing the work that is very close to their environment. So it won't stay to forever in darkness. There will be people coming to look at what you're doing, but prepare the stuff for people to understand what you're doing and all that. So make way for people to enter, and people will enter, I think.
In this multiplay, we have 3 artists showing. They done first time exhibition, by the way. Yeah.
He has a question. It's working? Is it working?
Hello.
No, it's
It's working.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Thank you for this lovely conversation. I had a question regarding site specificity and designing work around a site, and also trying to think about how you're altering the space as you are thinking as a curator and as the artist as well. How far do you kind of take that when you are thinking of historicity of the place, and also of how the stories kind of overlap onto each other, because as you are designing and redesigning, you are adding to the already existing stories. So could you please speak a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, all these points which you actually said are always considered in terms of the practicality, because also now, like in specificity to the Panjim Cube project, this is the new avatar of these little baby projects, which can then become its own spaces and claim certain spaces for certain time. Usually they are suspended, but they are also like have some gravity particular in Sari's work, which actually goes onto the floor. Of course, it begins from the site choosing, the specificity, historical references to it, but also allowing what it is today. Because I just cannot work on the textbook and open Wikipedia to figure out what it is now. I think constantly thinking about the weather, the temperature, all these practical designing solutions of it, but also conceptual placements and configurations of these things is a practical practicality towards these ideas. Like a proposal may look stunning on a paper, but when it is kind of realized, and even if we all parties are realizing, all stakeholders are realizing, it may totally collapse, just because the site does not give you that kind of a order, sound. I mean, when you are actually creating a project which is outside and you have to create a subject completely from roof to the floor, it's a total nightmare. Like, it's a total nightmare to produce electricity, produce care, and eventually, if there is a tech involved, such as in yours, there is another layer of complexity. But yeah, there are 7 projects out of 250 open call projects. We selected 15. From 15, we distilled into 10. 3 projects we just could not realize, and then landed up being on 7. So, but also it's a beginning of it. So.
Hi. First of all, really, really inspirational to hear all this conversation. And one thing I'm going to take away from today is the intonation of public art and not public art. It's kind of, it really resonates with the conversation you're having. I have a question about the connection to that audience, that public, and how it might be different for you when you're in a curatorial position or in an artist producing position. How maybe that triangulation as a curator that is trying to filter the artists through to that audience, how does that kind of resonate for you?
This has been a struggle for us because after creating works for this long, we have developed a certain way of approaching a subject matter. And this is our constant struggle between both of us, that how much it is our work eventually and how much it is the artist. Are we influencing and pushing and nudging of after Zoom call to kind of take a U-turn, please? Like, so this has been a struggle. Yeah, and then it's like, we think this can work, and we are very much aware about this
But
thing.
you're still very sensitive. Being artist yourself and having gone through the pain of creating art, you're sensitive to how an artist processes work, which is sometimes curators are very well read and they know the cultural context and they know what is kind of the hot topic and not unhot topic. But but you come from that process thing, which is what, as an artist, the joy of working with a curator who's an artist is that you can kind of you can bawl and you can cry and you can give galis and you can sort it out. But with a curator, it's and not all like the amazing curators. Obviously, I've worked with amazing curators, but I sometimes feel like, or maybe I imagine it, there's some kind of lack of love. I want to sort of there's a love question here. Love is sort of usually unconditional and kind of long lasting. At least the kind of love that I like. It's not that today it's Ukraine and tomorrow it's going to be Sudan, and next day it's going to be like some identity politics. You just spend a lot of time developing that, nurturing that love. Love and art are these two things that curators need to learn a little bit about, I sometimes feel.
I think the interesting word we don't really like get onto the love part.
Love to have.
Yeah. No. What I'm trying to say.
Nafrat doesn't come without it.
No. I'm just. There is a sort of a sense of relationship which we want to develop with the practice, and that can only happen when we are involved in it totally. There are areas where we've actually distanced ourselves, and because we see there is something happening on its own, and we kind of like come back and check. So there is a space which we kind of like try to give. And also learning to learn through different practice. I think that's what it is.
Yeah. Also, as someone who worked with artists who are curators or otherwise, I'm a curator myself, but I was trained as a painter. The question of materiality is a very, very big shift. Like when artists curate, they really know the material, and that changes the game completely because they are willing to try new things. They're willing to go out of the box, bring in challenges that they want to achieve because for the exploration of it, because somewhere that practice is always about figuring out, and Sumer and Jitin, I know we work very closely, the constant exploration of what is the ideal way to texturally, materially present this so that we are actually directly in the conversation, which I see that is the most important thing. And from a more, as Sarnath is saying, the curator should have love. I think with artists it's important to gain trust that I'm not against you, I'm your team. We can work together to be able to present the idea in the best way possible. But I think that can't happen with parachuting. You need to spend more than a few years to be able to come to that space where there's no clutter, you're actually having a conversation. And I think that level of sensitivity can only come when you go to some artist without an agenda. I think if I have to give advice to a curator, go have non-agenda conversations, and that's where you start. Yeah.
Sneak in a quick question. How do we make research-based art more engaging and participatory?
You cannot.
See, I'll go back to materiality because, when we say research-based practice of painting, I want to know why paintings still move you, after so many centuries. What is it within a one pictorial flame? The end pigment can actually have literally sometimes, even today I stand in some front of like Ratish T, a bunch of painters, Osha Joseph, painters in this country who are like magnificent, and you really feel it, you won't forget it when you see it. So at the end of the day, it is about the sensorial that you create. So you do the research, don't print it out and put it on the wall. You work hard to find a way that is sensorial, experiential, and we co-curate a project called Sustainer. That's what we are trying to do. We're actually bringing in research in the space of climate and sustainability to see what can be the experiential, spatial, material ways of. So remember, material equals to memory. So if you touch something, you feel something, you sense something, you will take back in some way. Unless you're like an academic from somewhere. I was also at some point, not anymore, thankfully. You will just rely on the text as a form of legibility, but actually the legibilities of the other senses is quite high. And I think that's one way to think, that you need to work very hard to be able to take the research into that space of materiality.
Can I just add one more point? It's a relevant question because we saw with what happened with Anthropocene, it was a bloodbath. You had to walk. I never read so much in my life as you went into a printed House of World Culture, all of this sort of corridors and corridors of research material and those sort of diagrammatic drawings which would remind you of textbook from school, and artists sort of trying kind of amateur bash at sort of whatever politics and this thing. We went through that phase. This sort of Anthropocene was when it kind of hit this sort of this knowledge production art. You remember that time, the good old days of knowledge production and all that. But then what Mopi is saying is very interesting. Research is orienting yourself. It's like chitta shuddhi. You make your brain kind of working towards, if your character, for example, is living in an outpost in Norway, in the polar region, and how mapping is sort of all the uncanny things that can actually happen if you have intensely researched what happens if you are in an outpost, living in an outpost in the polar area, and that requires research. So when you say research itself is like a big world, and I think artistic research is very different. Artistic research itself is artistic, if there's a word, process. And if you conflate that, if you conflate that with regular sociological or whatever research, which we've seen a lot coming out from different world, you find just illustration of research. So pages and pages of research with a little bit of popping and little illustration.
Walid is a great example of how research-based practice can go absolutely right, because he created a fictional archive and everybody for 20 years believed it was an original archive, and they wouldn't even question, because this is an amazing guy with extreme eloquence of Middle Eastern accent telling the Americans that I'm actually giving you the main narrative. And for the longest time, even today, they realize that he's actually telling the truth but with characters that don't exist. So it's actually completely, and he had to work thrice hard because he had to create fiction out of actual facts. So yeah.
Maybe because I think because research-based art, or the art that is informed by research, we have to understand that research is knowledge, and the art is basically what do you take from this knowledge, what interested you in this piece of in this domain and these areas where you have conducted research, and then as an artist, what have you processed? So what you're criticizing is valid, of course, so people don't let go of their research and they want to put all their papers on the wall and expect people to read them and then acknowledge the artist's effort in finding this. But I think, in my view, that the artwork comes in at the moment when you are extracting from all this knowledge. What's your telling of this? Maybe it's you retell the story in your own way. You're using your own words. Doesn't mean that you have to invent new content. But the format and it has to feed something artistic inside you, and this thing that comes out is, I think, should be the research-led art.
And Sarnath's practice, for example, comes with multiple texts mashing together and then coming out as a very different narrative, and so many different fields of research is intersecting with each other, but is presented as a narrative that you wouldn't actually tell which is flowing into what. And
The Weeping Tom project was There's one project, a book was published by us on a work of called Weaving Farm. So that was completely research-based project. Then the paintings were made later on.
And the outcome of this farming exercise of ours, I'm just like taking a 30-second to, we spend a lot of time with farming communities, and then finally outcome is a gameplay. Gameplay is about women farmers. So there is a solid research, but then we have distilled it out to become a new form or expansion of a publication. So there are many versions of one can actually do, you know.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, everyone, for
Thank you.
patiently listening. And thank you, all the panelists and friends. Yeah.
Thank you. Very nicely conducted. You're a professional. Oh my God.